The following segment is sponsored by Daniel A. White and Associates.
It does not necessarily reflect the views of WDEL or Forever Media.
Stay up to date. Keep it here for Delaware's afternoon news starting at 2. Now, back to the Rick Jensen Show on WDEL.
Well, I guess Dan's going to call in a second. Probably busy with a very important appointment, so when he calls, he calls. By the way, it is 302-529-1017, 302-529-1017, so I get right to your text messages. Because, yeah, you can text and talk, same phone number, 302-529-1017. Let's see on the text line, Cass. Welcome to New York. 8 migrant squatting suspects busted with guns, drugs, getting worse. Democrats, what happened to Build Back Better? Yeah, well, yeah. It just bad ideas, bad policies by people who think they're doing the right thing and doing something that's going to be wonderful for folks. Unfortunately, these are either unintended or intended consequences. There's Dan. Fantastic. So, intended consequences. You sit down with Dan White and Associates, financial planners specializing in retirement income. Also, other great folks, too. You know, Andrew Wood and Dan Simon working there as well. And they bring you a tip. Something that's going to help you lead a better life right after the news at 1:30. And here we are. Dan, it's Rick. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Rick. How are you?
Let's see. Waiting for the Phillies. A little bit of a delay. I think 2 hours we'll start the coverage here in WDEL. So
yeah, 4 o'clock. I think they come on.
Yeah. Well, we begin coverage at 3:30. So you want to be listening at 3:30. Yeah, otherwise, you miss all the good stuff like who's got a sprained ankle. Got to know. Right?
Yeah.
So,
the injury reports.
Yeah, I know. And I know we talk about baseball. By the way, Dan is a huge sports fan. Well, he's not that big, but as fans go, yeah, he's enormous. As fans go, he's a sports fan. I get a little bit worried, though, when we got one of our star hitters coming out and saying, hey, started the season with 2 home runs. I'm thinking, slow down there, pal. Hang on. It's a long season. Yeah, I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know, maybe I'm just too long a Phillies sufferer, but just, should I not worry about that, Dan?
It is a long season.
Yeah, right. Don't blow all your energy right in the first couple of weeks here.
Right.
All right,
yep.
So I know you have a couple of things to talk about, and I mentioned to you some of the things I was talking about. For example, like you've got something like 53% of Americans saying, we're behind on retirement planning. And good news, because I've asked this question of you. I've asked this question of Andrew as well as Dan Simon. All folks there is, what's the youngest? What's the youngest age of anybody that you guys are working with? You get phone calls, and I think it's really great news that Gen Zs, young people, under 27 years old, are now planning for retirement and trying to do something. Even if it means downloading the Robinhood app and trying to buy portions of shares. But that's what I'm wondering. Are you seeing more and more young people, too?
We're not. I mean, you know as well as I do, Rick, we focus on those near retirement. But I think it's great because I've been preaching for years, that the most important dollar in any retirement plan is the very first one. So the dollar you put away when you're 25 years old, by the time you're 65, that dollar is probably worth $20. But the one you put away when you're 64 years old, that's worth $1.05.
Yeah,
so it's not, you can play catch up all you want when you're 60 years old, but the kick or the trick is to start saving as early as possible and letting that money compound.
And the tough thing here, you look at this by generations, for example. And for people who are near retirement or they are retired, hey, you can get 4 or 5% in the money market account or money market fund, depending upon which it is. That's great compared to those last few years when you're getting like 0.2%. However, that 7% interest on a mortgage is crushing for the younger folks. So I guess it is about planning, isn't it?
It is. I mean, everybody says, there are parts of our society that it's more about survival than it is, retirement planning. I get that. But, I look around the area that we live in, and, if you drive down Concord Pike or 202 on a Friday night and you go past in Wilmington that restaurant alley where they have they're packed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's not a parking spot to be had. So, I mean, I think people can save for retirement. Yeah, you might not be able to go out to eat, once a week, You might not be able to get to Starbucks every morning. That's $5 to $10 a day. And then people say, oh, I can't afford to put $50 in a retirement account each month. I think that's silly.
That was my mom. My mom would eat ramen noodles when I was in college, and then when I was younger. And we would be exchanging studies on the stock market. She got a free account to value line and was using that. And then and I was studying and reading a lot. And we were on the phone all the time. I mean, gosh, like 4 or 5 times a week, talking about all sorts of aspects of retirement planning, not just the stock markets. And yeah, we talked about annuities and we talked about all kinds of guaranteed income. So, she was like that. She would not have cable and eat ramen noodles and be putting money away at that time because she realized, she had to do that and hadn't done that in the earlier years. Was successful. I mean, and I learned a lot from her as well. So people can do that. And I thought it was a good learning experience for me, too.
Yeah, they really can. I mean, I know people are struggling today. I mean, we came across an article, and it's kind of interesting, the articles you had sent me. One of my radio shows in 2 weeks is called Retirement Planning is Everyone's Issue. So it's not just, it's not just men, it's not just women, it's everybody. And when I did the research for that show, there's articles out there that say, Fidelity's saying hardship distributions from 401k plans are up 25% in the last 12 months. More people are borrowing from their retirement plans, and that's sad to see because, retirement savings ought to be sacred. It's not a Mac machine. It's not, we want to go on vacation. Let's pull $5,000 out of our retirement plan. I mean, you're basically robbing Peter to pay Paul, and the older Rick Jensen is not going to be happy with the current Rick Jensen, True. Because you're raiding the retirement account, might feel, temporary gratification, but, down the road when you're ready to retire, you're going to regret it. So
because you're missing out on all that compound interest or dividend growth.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, I want to ask you a question, though, about that sort of thing, which is a little bit different, though. And get your take on this. It's something my uncle did a couple of times. So my uncle had these pretty decent-sized life insurance policies. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it was whole life. So what he would do is when he was going to buy a car, he would actually borrow money from his life insurance policy. But then he structured it, talking to his agent, he structured it so he would be paying it back. It's kind of like paying himself as opposed to paying the bank. And from everything I heard from that side of my family, it worked out well. And he laughed and said, "You know what? I never really wanted to buy life insurance." And of course, evil looks from everybody else in the family. And he lived a long time though. And he said, but it worked out because he would borrow from that, buy a car, and then pay that back every single month. And I'm wondering, have you ever heard of such a thing?
Oh, yeah, that's very popular. The problem I see with that, and if you pay it back, that's great. A lot of people just view, hey, I've saved this money up in the life insurance policy. I'm not going to take a loan against it. It's tax-free when you pull the money out. If you pay it back, great, but a lot of people say, hey, it was my money to begin with. Why do I got to pay it back? With 401k plans, it kind of works the same way. You can withdraw up to 50% of your account balance up to $50,000, but 401k plans make you pay it back because it's not taxable when you take it out in the form of a loan. But if you don't pay it back, then they're going to hit you with that amount as taxable income. So life insurance does enjoy some tax advantages that other vehicles don't, and that is one of them. You can pull the money out on a tax-free basis, and I think it's a great idea if, again, you do plan on paying it back because you are paying yourself back. So
yeah, you got to do it.
There is interest on the loan, same with the 401k, but you're paying it back to yourself. So
yeah, I'm surprised to see how many people, millions of Americans, are claiming hardship because you have to be able to prove that, I guess, in order to borrow money from, say, your 401k plan. So since COVID, have those rules lightened up a little bit, or is it still very, very strict?
No, they're still pretty strict. I mean, Fidelity, like I said, they said hardship distributions increased 25%.
Yeah.
But Empower, which is another major retirement plan provider, they reported a 46% jump in hardship withdrawals over the past year, and they're saying that the average amount of each withdrawal was around $10,000. So I think you are starting to see, people saying, "Oh, inflation's under control." I'm not sure it is just yet because, again, people are struggling with just, standard of living, for them to have to raid their retirement accounts just to pay bills. It's not a good state of affairs.
The last number I saw, people like to say, oh, well, it's down 3.4%. It's only 3.2%. However, when you take a look at inflation since January 2021, I mean, the last number I saw was still way over 17%. And that's the key. In fact, oh my gosh, I'm looking at this, and we're at about 18% right now. So 18%. And as I've said, if you're not making 18% more now than you were in January 2021, you're actually in the real world making less money. And it's so hard. I mean, I've come upon months where I've had expenses that exceeded cash flow. I think it's pretty normal, and you just got to dip in. But to do that month after month after month is got to be just excruciating.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I came across an article that said the average American now needs close to $12,000 more than what they needed in 2021. So, again, if your income is not going up by $12,000, then you're out of pocket. And you've got to pull that money from someplace just to maintain your standard of living. And that's why I think we're seeing these hardship withdrawals are increasing.
Also, I think why we're seeing so many of these employment numbers, people are saying, oh, great, they added 200,000 jobs or 175. But tragically, so many of those are second jobs, third jobs, or people who are finally getting into the job market after being out for 3 years. You look at the U6 numbers, which is the Nonpartisan Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it shows how many people are unemployed and looking, how many are unemployed and they just gave up, how many people are employed but they're not able to make enough money to
underemployed.
Yeah, they're underemployed, exactly, and all that. And when you look at that number, you realize we're not just at 3.4% employed. In some states, for example, it's about 10%. It could be 8%, 9%. It's actually quite tragic, I think, Dan.
Yeah, I was talking to Andrew in here this morning. We were talking about the unemployment numbers, and he says, yeah, when you look at it, all the jobs, when they come out and they say, hey, we created 160,000 jobs this past month. A lot of them are public sector jobs. They're government jobs,
Yes.
So the private sector, and that's just ballooning the debt more and everything else. The private sector is not keeping pace, and I think ultimately if that continues, obviously we're going to have problems.
Yeah, I like to look at the U6 numbers. I think that gives us a more realistic picture of what the unemployment rate is, and it's well over 7%. And here in Delaware, sadly, our unemployment rate is higher than all the other Mid-Atlantic states. It's tough. So, but I'm sure that's not the only thing you wanted to talk about today when you called in with your tip.
No, I mean we were looking into some of these things, and I think I said to you, we can just kind of generally discuss some of these issues. I mean, we could talk about IRA rules and that kind of thing, but the bottom line is, I mean, I think as people are going forward, as you said, there's a retirement savings crisis. I mean, Larry Fink, he's the CEO of BlackRock. Mm-hmm. He came out, and he's 71 years old, and he's still working. And he says, I think the world needs to raise the retirement age. We ought to be working longer. This is a guy that's 71 years old and has more money than he knows what to do with. And he's saying, it's not just me. I mean, they're worried about my Social Security. They ought to be worried about firming up the system and people working a little longer because there is a retirement crisis out there. And I think it is. It's not men. It's not women. It's across the board. People have not saved enough for retirement. And Social Security is a base, but it's not supposed to be your only source of income in retirement. So,
here's another thing, too. I mean, and to that, by the way, I've talked to friends of mine, said, I'm going to work till I die, and tragically, one friend of mine did. But let me relate this to, like, this guy who called in yesterday. He's an iron worker. A proud member of the 451. All right.
Right.
451. So, he called in, and we were talking about a number of different things, but I listened to, like, the CEO of BlackRock. Oh, you have to work longer. He's 71. What does he do? He probably has a chauffeur. I doubt that he's laundering his own clothes or making his own dinners. And meanwhile, you got the guy who's an iron worker working on the bridges, and you're and you're 71 years old, you're worth $1 gazillion, you got other people wiping your, well, you know what I mean. You got other people doing all these other things for you, and you're telling this guy who might be 62 years old, and you can look at his hands, and you know that he's a hardworking guy and has been since he was probably 18 or 21 years old, and you're telling this guy that he needs to work until he's 70, 75 years old. No. I mean, that is an extraordinarily stupid thing to say, and it doesn't take into consideration the kind of work that people are doing when this guy at BlackRock says, oh, yeah, we got to raise the retirement age.
No, and I hear what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, it does go by occupation. I mean, obviously, the steam fitters and the people that roofers and any manual type labor job, it's not realistic to think they're going to be able to do that into their 70s. I agree with you 100%. But I think what he was saying was, don't be running out to take Social Security at 62 years old, and longevity is probably the biggest risk that all of us face, because the longer we live, the longer your money's got to last.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's the challenge we all face. And then what he's saying is, by delaying Social Security, maybe you live off some of your other assets and you delay Social Security till a later date. That's going to benefit you down the road, because we're likely to be here longer than we think.
We have a bigger problem with morbidity. I can't even talk now. It's only a 12-hour show. I mean, you can't talk in a 12th hour. We have a bigger problem with morbidity than we do with mortality.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. We're more likely to get disabled than we are to die.
And something else, Dan, and I'd like you to reiterate this too, because I have not looked at my Social Security benefits for actually a couple, 3-4 years, I guess, but I did. And it seems to me, you look at the difference between how much you bring in from Social Security at between the age of 60 and 65, and then look at the age between 65 and 70, and that's huge.
It is. Between 62 and 70, it's about 77% more money.
Yeah.
If you wait until 70. So it really does make a difference. We run these Social Security reports for people, and for married couples, I mean, if we look at, hey, this is the worst way you can do it and this is the best way, a lot of times it's over $500,000. I mean, that's some serious money.
Now, when you say over $500,000, you mean that's over your lifetime?
Lifetime income.
Yeah.
Lifetime income.
Yeah,
we'll run them. Yeah. We'll assume the male makes it to 84 and the female makes it to 87, something along those lines. And again, that's what you got to look at. How much are you going to collect over your lifetime? Not necessarily, it's $300 more a month or that kind of thing. No, it's serious money. There's a lot of money on the table there.
By the way, they're living longer, huh? Is that because we want to die sooner? Old joke. Never mind. I love you, honey. All right, Dan White Associates. You can give him a call at 888-690-8820. You got a couple people who are asking you, what's the minimum amount you work with, and blah, 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 blah. Look, if you got a question like that, call Dan. He's a great guy. 888-690-8820, right? 888-690-8820. Ask for Dan. Not going to charge you anything. Sit down, do a plan for you. He's a great guy. I've used him for years and years and years. I'm glad to have you on the program. Also, Sunday mornings at 7 o'clock, On the Money. So, what's the topic this Sunday?
Yeah, this Sunday is kind of interesting. It's about what happens when a spouse dies. I mean, you basically get hit with higher taxes because your deduction gets cut in half, your standard deduction gets cut in half. Your income may not get cut in half, so you're usually faced with higher taxes, and we'll go over some strategies people can use when they fall into that situation.
Sunday morning at 7 here on WDEL. Thanks, Dan.
Have a great day, Rick.
Go Phils.